Here's our agenda of our presentation today. First, we will introduce a microeconomic principle relevant to WestJet, which the economic problem, demand and supply, and elasticity. Then we will move on the production costs and the market structure. We will discuss why the airline industry is oligopoly and WestJet's competitive behaviors. Finally, we will conclude the presentation with our business recommendation to help WestJet lower costs and increase revenue. Here comes to the introduction. The reason why we do the analysis of WestJet to evaluate WestJet's business strategies through the lens of microeconomic principles. The second, we will analyze how the supply and demand, short-run costs, and price elasticity influence WestJet's pricing and production to inform our strategy recommendations. Finally, from the research of WestJet, we will analyze WestJet's market structure to define its specific market type and reasons.
Alrighty, so now I'll be talking about Chapter 1, the economic problem. So, what is microeconomics? Microeconomics helps WestJet make important decisions about their business. This can include pricing, production, incomes, employment, and taxes. So, for Canada, airlines are influenced by a bunch of factors. A few good ones are fuel costs and a changing consumer demand. So, what does microeconomic decision making look like in WestJet? It can look like setting ticket prices based on demand. And for example, in 2023, 50% of WestJet tickets were actually priced under $200. And this really shows that a lot of consumers have a strong preference for price-friendly fares.
The price elasticity of demand for air travel is going to be determined by multiple things, including available substitutes. If you're traveling a short distance, let's say from Calgary to Edmonton, and flights were more expensive than you expected, you may find that it's cheaper and a better idea to just drive or take a bus. Income affects the demand for flights as well. If you're traveling for leisure, you will be steered away from flights that are costing higher, more than normal. For the trip planning period, consumers have more control over their flight prices that they pay. If they have a year to plan for their trip, they have multiple months to monitor the flight prices and other substitute airline companies. InterVista Consulting did a report in 2013 where they reviewed the price elasticity of demand for different travelers, including leisure, business, short haul, and long haul. They confirmed that leisure and short haul trip travelers, their demand was more elastic. If the prices went up, then there would be a decrease in tickets purchased, whereas with business and long haul trips, the demand was more inelastic. With business, you have to be at a specific place for a specific day, and you have to pay the price for that ticket, even if it's higher than usual. Added fees also affected the price elasticity because when more fees are added, for example, airport improvement fees, these are typically charged back to consumers and will increase the fares, which decrease the demand for travel. In this slide, I'll review the production decisions and costs in the short run for WestJet. They have their explicit costs, which are labor, aircraft maintenance, fuel, but there's also implicit costs, such as their missed income on not renting out their assets to other companies. If they have aircraft sitting around they're not being used, they could be making a profit off leasing them or renting them out to other companies. They have also leased aircraft in the past, and with this, they have lost out on the resale value if they're just paying the fees and the maintenance, but they have nothing to show for it at the end of that term. Depreciation is an example of implicit cost as well, as this is recorded, but there's no official outflow of cash, and it just reduces their future resale value. WestJet reviews and records the accounting profit, but they would also use economic profit for decision making since this is such a large company. Let's say WestJet maintain the number of airplanes that they have on hand, but they increase the labor They increase the amount of crews employed in a day, and they are able to schedule more flights. The increase in flights that can be scheduled after hiring the additional staff is an example of marginal product, as there is the fixed input being the number of machines and aircraft that they have. If every aircraft is being used every day, there would come into delays, and this would be an example of the law of diminishing returns. Pushing the maximum output of flights would result in more maintenance, and they'd have to cut back. WestJet also implements division of labor in the way that each employee has a set task. The pilots fly the planes, but they don't unload or reload your bags or fuel the planes. And this has helped with time and cost savings and allows for a more productive turnover for flights. With every additional flight, they'll have to pay for more labor and more fuel, but then they will also be paying the same amount for certain costs, such as their corporate side of the business with accounting and marketing. There will be set hours, and the number of flights being added does not affect that. We've seen ways that airline companies have cut costs in the past, which is reducing the number of customer service staff in person, and then also digitalizing processes for check-in and flight booking. Some other ways that they could cut costs would be if their variable inputs, the prices for their variable inputs such as fuel and labor decreased, but then also they could reduce the number of complementary products that they offer to customers in flight.
WestJet's fixed inputs are airport sizes, number of gates, and the number of planes. As for variable inputs, labor, frequency of flights, fuel costs, and the number of seats filled are all variable inputs, which can be adjusted or changed very quickly.
Awesome. So we're going to move into Chapter 8, Perfect Competition. So what is a perfectly competitive market? It is when there are many buyers and sellers, there's identical products, no barriers to entry or exit, and firms are price takers and they can actually set their own prices. So in short, it's when there's no single company that can influence prices and everyone is in equal competition to each other. So what does that have to do with WestJet? So WestJet is an oligopoly, more specifically a differentiated oligopoly, and there are three reasons. First, because within Canada's airline industry, there are actually a few number of sellers. The main competitors are actually WestJet and Air Canada. And second, there is a very high barrier to entry since it's very difficult and costly for someone to start up an airline. And third, there's actually differentiated products between competitors. And for WestJet specifically, they really like to differentiate with their branding, where they rely on being friendly and affordable and with more focus on domestic flights.
Market definition of WestJet and the differentiation. WestJet operates in the imperfect competition market. The Canada airline industry is an oligopoly market. New firms are difficult to enter. However, WestJet used a product differentiation to differentiate their servers from competitors. In addition, WestJet used a Nash equilibrium game theory to deal with the firm's competition. Now it comes to the collusive and the non-collusive behaviors. Collusive behaviors, although the formal cartels are illegal, WestJet still faces the allegation of the informal collusive behaviors. For the non-collusive behaviors, WestJet typically act as a price follower in the firm, followed by the market leader, the Air Canada. For the demand curve, the WestJet pricing is sticky, so they follow the kinked demand curve.
We already know that WestJet is not a monopoly because they have direct competitors in the same industry and they are not setting the price for flights, they're just following the market demand. But there's also no technical or legal barriers for entering this market. One thing that someone who wants to, or a company that wants to enter this market would have to consider is the economic barrier for the high cost. If WestJet was a monopoly, consumers would see an increased cost for air transportation, reduction in flight availability, and the potential for price discrimination.
Here are two recommendations we want to give to the consumers. First, buy round-trip tickets for the high-demand routes in advance, at least about 3 weeks ahead. And the consumer can save about $520 per ticket. Here are two recommendations. About the second recommendation, we recommend the consumer compare WestJet fares with substitute options such as budget carriers before booking to avoid premium price.
Awesome. So now we're going to be moving on to business recommendations. And our first business recommendation is to increase capacity to lower cost. So WestJet should increase the number of seats to help lower the average cost per passenger and generate profitability. If this recommendation is not followed, their per passenger cost will still remain high and they will not generate profitability or offer competitive pricing. Our second business recommendation is differentiating prices to maximize revenue. So WestJet should offer different prices to different customers, such as student or family bundles, to attract more customers and increase their revenue. If this is not followed, it will cause WestJet to miss out on new demographics, losing potential revenue.
Finally, we come to the conclusion. The conclusion is about what if the consumer and the company doesn't follow our recommendations. The first, for consumers, financial loss will happen if you fail to book tickets in advance. This may force consumer into the inelastic demand window, resulting in paying more money. In addition, ignoring substitutes means accept the airline company to use arbitrary sticky price to increase ticket price. For the WestJet, falling to increase seat capability will increase distribution to fixed costs and directly reducing profitability. In addition, without price differentiation strategy like bundles, the company will miss attract price sensitive consumers, result in losing revenue.